My presentation has been uploaded to the district website, so you can download the PDF version of it. If you go to the, and there'll be a slide at the end that shows you how to get there. It'll be at the main website, hpschools.net. You'll go to the Board of Education area in the main navigation bar of that main page. And then there's a drop-down link that says budget fiscal year 2019-2020 information. And I'll also upload supplementary documents as I get them about the budget. So I'm going to spend about 15 minutes sharing a lot of numbers, which is why I do recommend you eventually download the file. And then, of course, we'll open up for questions from the board, and the public will have an opportunity to speak and ask questions if they'd like as well. This was, like has been the case for the last 3 years, including this year, an extremely, extremely difficult process. You hear about it in the news. You know, some districts are getting more state aid, like us. Some are getting a lot more state aid, and some, like Old Bridge, are not getting any state aid. In fact, they're losing state aid. They're closing schools. So superintendents and finance committees on boards are having to confront a range of challenges, some good, some bad. Regardless, we are all spending a lot of time on the process. Those of you who've never put a budget together, just know it's not a, you look at all what you're going to pull in, your revenues, and you look at all your expenditures, and then you figure it all out. It takes days and days to work through this process, and it starts as early as late October, early November, when the school principals provide, or they should provide, information to the teachers and the support staff about their supplies for the following year. Then in December and January, Ms. Hofela, the business administrator, and I meet with every single educational leader in the district, top down, including the facilities director, Mike O'Donnell, and his supervisor, Angela Melendez, and Gary Contursi, who's our chief plumber, electrician, jack of all trades. And in those meetings that occur December and January, we spend about 2 hours with each individual, and we require them to tell us what the rationale is for every expenditure. And in some cases, reasons why they're spending less than they did in previous years. Then, the Finance and Facilities Committee of the board, which is made up and chaired by Mark Krieger, our president, Darcy Simbaristi, and Rob Magaziner, who's sitting next to Mark, meet with me, Linda Hofela, and all of the school leaders again. They come out and they do their whole presentation to the board. That happens in February and March. And again, they have to rationalize every expenditure that they're proposing. We are at the place at which now, March 18th, we're having our first board discussion. This is a preliminary budget that the Finance Committee, Linda and I, are proposing to the full board. We have 6 weeks until we have to present the final budget in May to the Department of Education. We will be meeting with the community. We just settled on a date to meet with the parent community, guardian community. We'll be using an Irving PTO meeting. You can see that'll happen on April 10th at night. I'll provide more details, probably by Honeywell, as soon as I have them. But for now, I can tell you that it'll be evening, April 10th. And then we're going to meet with the general community, Highland Park community, at the conservative congregation on First Ave, on South First Avenue. There'll be another board discussion April 15th. That's a biggie because I'll have Susie Boudin and Dee Dee Deecher, the Director and Supervisor of Educational Services, here to talk about a program they're proposing that can actually save money as we build our own special needs classroom for students who we've sent out of district and are paying tuition to attend somewhere else, or those who we'd like to keep in district. So she'll come out and actually talk about that. That would be proposed for Bartle. April 15th is when they'll present that program and take questions from the board. And of course, if the public comes, they can ask questions about it then as well. We'll also be talking, I might have Dr. Nicosia come. She doesn't know that yet, but I might be inviting her to come to talk about the technology initiative that we're also going to be looking at for next year, which I'll get into when I present my slides. If you had to whittle down the budget changes into a couple lines, they're here. They're here. These are the things that get me up at 3, 4 in the morning for about a month as I'm finally getting down to trying to balance this budget. I obsess about them. I think about everywhere I can recoup expenditures, how I can generate more revenue, because the bottom line is these are things, many of which I can't control, or the board can't control. Drastic increases in our special education services, especially at Irving, with early intervention presenting student after student after student at the early ages of 3.5, 4, and 5, who present in several cases the nonverbal behaviors. They can't speak. They don't have certain motor skills. They take a lot of therapeutic support. All the way to those students who are presenting behavioral challenges at Bartle and the middle school. That has in turn increased our out-of-district tuition costs and transportation costs every year for the last 3 years exorbitantly. It's unsustainable. This is not something that we're going to be able to sustain. I'll get to that at the end of my presentation. The only way we're going to make our budgets work, since we've already cut to the bone, which is why a lot of you are here tonight, is if we generate revenue. We've got to find a way to generate revenue because there's nowhere left to cut. We can't control certain things, so we have to find a way to build revenue. And of course, we are going to always incur costs for increased health benefits and salaries. One thing I would like to also highlight is the sudden flux of unilateral placements we're seeing. We saw at least 3 in the last couple of months. These are situations in which a family or guardian will enroll the child in another school. In our case, it's been predominantly private schools, not parochial schools, private schools, religious schools, without, in most cases, even having gone through the child study team evaluation process here in the school district, which is why it's called a unilateral placement. It's one way. We're taking this route, and we'll let you guys pick up the tab later. What ends up happening is we question as a board whether we are going to litigate and try to contest the situation. Hey, give us a chance. Why don't you send your child to our school, at least so we can evaluate him or her to determine if we can provide the services. Or in other cases, we have to settle. We're always looking at the most cost-benefit way to do it, because at this point, the child's not even in the school district here, so it's not a matter of, it becomes not as much a matter of the child, unfortunately, as it does how we can make this work so we're not expending dollars after dollars. So let's talk about the dollars. First, I'd like to propose all the expenditures that we have in our budget. I'm not going to go over all the numbers. I would just like to make sure you understand what you're looking at. And again, you can download the slides and look at them more closely. I've tried to break out the major categories that cost money. And of course, this column, I think, is what you would be most interested in looking at, what the increases end up being and what we're proposing. You can see salary, benefits, special education salary, special education out-of-district placement take up a lot of those costs. I want to make sure you understand what this means. This asterisk, which refers to the fact that we're drawing funds from capital reserve, means not actually coming out of the operational budget. It's coming out of a reserve fund we have to tend to certain projects, which I'll mention on another slide, like repairing leaky roofs. Teachers who work at here in the middle school, especially in the gym, I can see Ms. Washington's head going up and down a little bit. No, we have a problem with some of our roofs, Irving as well, high school. We're trying to make sure we can prevent mold, moisture, and whatnot. There are also funds that we might draw from capital reserve to continue our air conditioning installation project, which we all know is a need. So such things as that. And of course, if you have any other questions about what we'd be using the capital reserve funds for, and I don't answer them, you can either ask them in public comment, or you can always email me, and if I can't answer, I'll defer to Ms. Hofela. I'd like to show you 2 slides that break the expenditures down into a little more detail. First, to echo the comment I made earlier about the special education out-of-district costs that we incur every year, you should know that since at least the 2016-17 budget, they've gone up drastically every year. One reason why we are able to keep the change at a relatively decent rate, close to $100,000 in just tuition, Going into next year is because of this program. One reason is because of the program I referred to that we'd like to start at Bartle, which would keep some of our students in district, bring back potentially almost a handful of students from out of district. I'd also like to show you how salaries have impacted the budget, not only how we have incurred additional expenditures as a result of salaries, but also the savings that I'm proposing as a result of the reductions in force, which I've proposed. I'm not going to read all the reasons. You can see we're increasing salaries because of the annual salary increase that we negotiated with HPEA. The additional increases to staff we've had to make, or will have to make, mostly in special education. Keep in mind, we had to make on the fly relatively sudden changes this year in staffing to accommodate the additional special needs students, which we couldn't project we would be receiving, especially at the early childhood level. I'm talking about hiring additional teacher, hiring additional powers. That's wrapped up in this number, as well as whatever increases we may have to make going into next year. And the savings to staff, including paraprofessionals, 2 Bartle Elementary teachers, the high school economics teacher, and several 6th period compensations equal this number. Now, you're all here mostly because of this, and I respect that, and I need you to know this is the very, very last thing the Finance Committee and I ever discussed. It's what I get up about early in the morning, worrying about. It's the last thing I ever want to do, and it's what makes me very upset. We'll just leave it at that, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about that in the near future. I want to talk a little bit about revenues before I wrap up my presentation. You have heard that districts like Highland Park receive state aid. It's not consequential. I mean, this looks like a big number. It's far, far short of being fully funded. We're years and years away, and many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars from actually being fully funded by the state. We had been working hard for the last 2 years, including this proposed budget year, to save $1 million in costs. I review every requisition before it turns into a purchase order that a school leader presents to me, or a teacher might give to a school leader, to verify its necessity, so that I can work closely with Ms. Hofola to be sure that by June 30, we've got $1 million that we didn't need to spend because we were able to cut costs somewhere this year that we can carry over into next year's budget to offset the tax levy. It's a lot of money. I get a lot from Ms. Hofola about that. I'm worried about it, Scott. I'm worried about it. But if I continue to review those requisitions carefully, I think we'll stay on track to have that fund balance of $1 million. I mentioned the capital reserves earlier. Extraordinary aid is the additional money that the Department of Education gives us in July to offset special education costs. We haven't seen an uptick in it in the last couple of years. It's been hovering around $300,000. I think this year we've received about $298,000, and then maybe some change. So we're not anticipating additional extraordinary aid. If we're fortunate and we get it in July, great. But we can't assume we're going to get additional extraordinary aid to offset the special needs challenges that we've incurred. And then finally, this is the number of dollars that we are expecting to generate from taxes, from the tax levy. This is the slide that I think most residents find interesting, because those of us who own a home in Highland Park are always wondering how much our taxes are going to go up. You can see with these numbers, if you just look at the last column, particularly the last 3 rows, columns, last 3 columns, last row. The tax levy is going down to its lowest numbers in years, probably not since the Dr. Wood years when she was superintendent. This is not something that we can control. We can't generate more taxes than what we are restricted to generate. There's a 2% cap. And those of you who know how the formula works with bank cap, we have no more bank cap. We had some bank cap a couple of years ago. I don't believe we had any bank cap going into this year. The only way we're able to generate, actually, I'm going to tell you in a second, the only reason why we're able to generate over 2% is because we can actually get a request to generate more tax revenue to offset health benefit costs, and I'll get to that in a second. But the one thing I'd also like to point out for those residents who might be watching at home or who are in the audience, the increase for an average home, including ratables, the money that the businesses in the community, in a sense, contribute to the pool of revenue, between that and our 2% or 2.73% tax levy with debt service means that the increase for an average home would be $123. Again, the lowest in at least the last 4 to 5 years. This is the reason why we're able to increase the tax levy. We can adjust the money we generate by 9%, more than the 2% because of the health benefits that went up. Again, this is the direction for you to download the slideshow. Right now, all that's up there is my PDF version of these slides, but there will be more information as it becomes available. And with that, I'd like to sit down and offer the board the opportunity to ask questions. Mark Krieger has lent his support to answer some of those questions if I can't answer them, and Ms. Hoffler can answer the others. So are there any questions from the board?